This is a presentation of Mathematics and Poetry by David Eugene Smith. This work is in the public domain in the United States. This little book, printed in the style of the master craftsmen of the Renaissance and bound in Florentine paper of the period of the Medici, is sent to various friends as a slight testimonial of appreciation of their goodness of spirit in wishing, once upon a time, two travelers a bon voyage from lands of snow to lands of sun. Because this group of friends was composed chiefly of those to whom the science venerable is at the same time the science poetical, this booklet has been made the receptacle of a brief essay upon mathematics and poetry. May it bring to those to whom it is sent, and in particular to Professor and Mrs. Coolidge, some of the pleasure that their words and letters and parting gifts brought to two voyagers who crossed a very inhospitable sea in the month of February in the year 1922. David Eugene Smith. Here beginneth a little essay upon mathematics and poetry, containing portions of a lecture given by one who seeks to lead others to teach the most ancient branch of science in the spirit of the most ancient branch of letters. Weierstrass, than whom few men of his calling were better able to speak with authority, once remarked that a mathematician who is not somewhat of a poet will never be a perfect mathematician. And Thoreau, who is not commonly credited with the mathematical tastes which he really possessed, stated the converse proposition in these words: "We have heard much about the poetry of mathematics, but very little of it has yet been sung. The ancients had a juster notion of their poetic value than we. The most distinct and beautiful statements of any truth must take at last the mathematical form." Thoreau's friend, the sage of Concord, expressed both these ideas even more clearly when he wrote, "We do not listen with the best regard to the verses of a man who is only an algebraist. But if a man is at once acquainted with the geometric foundations of things and with their festal splendor, his poetry is exact and his arithmetic musical." Even more distinctly has the significance of the union of mathesis, learning, and poesis, creation, been expressed by Dr. Thomas Hill in these words: "Mathesis and poetry are the utterance of the same power of imagination, only that in the one case it is addressed to the head, and in the other to the heart. If we seek for points of contact between mathematics and poetry, they are easy to find. Voltaire mentioned one when he remarked, 'One merit of poetry few will deny. It says more and in fewer words than prose.' The sonnet is an instance, with its embodiment of a noble thought in a limited number of lines. And the quatrains of the old Persian algebraist, Omar Khayyam, furnish other examples. Perhaps the Japanese haiku, with their 17 words, are the most exquisite specimens of all, as witness Dr. Nitobe's translation of the lament of a mother on the death of her child. How far gone today upon the chase, I wonder, has gone my little bunter of the dragonfly. words of which the full significance can be appreciated only by those who have watched the play of children in the land of happiest childhood. How equally true are the words of the old man of Verney if we change them to read, "One merit of mathematics few will deny. It says more, and in fewer words, than any other science. The world knows no such brevity outside this particular field. Poetry and mathematics, therefore, have this feature in common, that they say more, and in fewer words, than any other written forms." Byron suggested a second point of contact when he spoke of the power of thought, the magic of the mind. For where does the student experience this magic of the mind, as he does in reading the adventures of Aeneas, of Ulysses, and of Sir Lancelot, unless it be in those symmetric expressions of algebra, which are themselves verses, and which show at its best the power of thought? To one whose teacher is at heart a poet, such expressions combine all the better elements of poetry: perfect symmetry, perfect rhythm, perfect truth, and the power of thought, the magic of the mind. Perhaps the strongest bond of sympathy between mathematics and poetry is the endless revelations of each, the rhythm of discovery. Dr. Johnson remarked that the essence of poetry is invention, such invention as, by producing something unexpected, surprises and delights. But he might with perfect assurance have said the same for mathematics. It is the very essence of geometry that, by the simple transformation of figures, and especially in the projective domain, we indulge in such invention as, by producing something unexpected, surprises and delights. When we say that poetry is unfallen speech, we may properly add the dual proposition: pure geometry is undebased thought. And when we say that architecture is frozen music, we may add that it is also crystallized geometry. There are no cornerstones that mark off the domain of mathematics from the domains of music and poetry and architecture and the fine arts in general, save those imaginary ones which ignorance or indolence of thought have sought to erect. When Bailey, in his Festus, wrote the lines, "Poets are all who love, who feel great truths and tell them," he was not thinking merely of those who set forth their thoughts in verse. And when the elder Disraeli asserted that philosophy becomes poetry, and science imagination, in the enthusiasm of genius, he was addressing you and me and all who have the privilege that is ours, the opportunity and the privilege of placing mathematics in the same domain as poetry and imagination. This book was written by David Eugene Smith. It was printed by the Giannini Press, which maintains the high standards of Ratdolt and the Aldines. It was bound by Giulio Giannini e Figlio, master craftsmen in their art, in Florence, in the month of April, Anno Domini, 1922. Explicit feliciter. That concludes this presentation of Mathematics and Poetry by David Eugene Smith. Thank you for listening.